Dear awakening souls out there, today is the 5th of May 2024, and in this episode we'll be talking about the masculine-feminine archetype. Before we start, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Roxana. I'm your hero's journey and transformation coach, and this is the Conscious Cruising Podcast. This podcast aims at connecting and unifying like-minded people. If these reflections resonate with you, please consider liking and sharing the video. And even better, subscribe to the channel. You'll be helping this to grow into a community of awakened individuals, all living with the same goal in mind: freedom and personal sovereignty. Now is the time to open up our hearts and tear down the walls of separation and distance from each other. Now is the time for embracing our true self, which means that we need to rediscover a part of ourselves that we no longer even knew existed. Now is the time to respond to that call and just show up to the party and be present. We need to follow our way home through the unconscious. And one of the most effective navigation systems for discovering patterns in our wounded behavior, as I call it, is through the study of archetypes. Archetypes are a way to illustrate the structure of the psyche so that you can learn and understand your archetypes and your personal archetype of patterns. They're there to help you recognize why you make the choices you do, how to expand and break, for example, the addict pattern. The addict is an archetype. A big influence on my work on archetypes is medical intuitive and author Caroline Myss, who examined the patterns of hundreds of archetypes that exist in human consciousness and uncovered an alchemy of spirituality we can all use for self-understanding, healing, and divine connection. Yes, because when you learn to speak in archetypes, you start to see the world and everything in it in a very different way. And the masculine-feminine, which you're looking at today, is one of the most primal archetypes in existence. The masculine-feminine is actually one archetype, not two. Often we hear that both men and women actually embody both energies, though as a woman, I am feminine, and a man will be masculine. Before we continue, I'd like to remind any listener who might start thinking about gender politics that this is a brief introduction and description of the original meaning and birth of this particular archetype, which is one of the most primal, as I said earlier. I will not be addressing any other gender or sexual ideal or ideas or political agenda. There isn't one here, and I just wanted to make that clear to avoid confusion and any possible conflict. There is a creation story that's connected to the masculine and feminine. So in order to introduce the masculine and feminine archetype, I'd like to very briefly explain that it's born from a split. In reality, this explanation is quite a complex one, and I'll leave a link in this description section below. And it's a link to a video by Benjamin Balderson, who's another scholar of archetypes, who has a very deep knowledge of this subject, of the origin of this archetype. And bear in mind that this knowledge has become difficult to come by on the internet, because it has been suppressed quite successfully. So, to summarize a lot Benjamin's description, we're looking at the allegory of how the Trinity formed. So we're looking at this from the allegory of scriptures and from the Eden perspective and the all, the creator. What we had originally before duality was the all, which you may also know as the I am, and also the alpha. In the beginning, we have the whole, And this encompasses everything in the universe. This is all that there is. And when you're being all that there is, when you are all that there is, you had nothing to take perspective off of when you have no duality. You can't even say that you are a circle or any type of shape. When you're all that there is, when it's only I am, the only thing that you understand is that you are. Simple. So its existence was the only thing that it understood. So in the beginning, its existence was the only thing that it understood. It had no way to measure itself against anything else. And after enough time of just being the I am split itself in two. But what we have here is still just two opposite. We still don't have life. We still don't have any movement. If the positive, which is the masculine, reaches the negative, which is the feminine, then they just balance each other out into the 0 point. We don't have any life, any movement, so there's nothing else. It's just two parts. But now, at this point, the I am understood a little bit more, and it understood complete duality in its epitome. But this is all it understood. So now in the split, at this point, we have the All-Mother, which is the void, the feminine, and the All-Father, which is the masculine, the material. And to keep it simple, I'll just add that the All-Father, the material, splits again into the masculine and feminine archetype that we know today and that we're going to talk about in this episode. So forget the rest about the video. If you want to check Benjamin's video, just check it out. It's only 10 minutes long. So right here we have a whole split into two. They're two but not two, which actually reminds me of a Buddhist joke that a master once shared with me. Basically, the joke is, how many Buddhists does it take to change a light bulb? Two but not two. So moving on, the oneness, the all, has split into two, but there's still one. And when the split happens, a space is formed. The masculine and feminine just change spatial positioning after the split. Imagine your two fists. If you stretch your arm out in front of you, and you move your fists by turning them in the same direction. Start turning them left and right, as you are kind of like moving the steering wheel of the car. Yeah, they're going in the same direction. And if you continue to rotate the fist in the same direction, and you move the two fists to face each other like magnets pushing against one another, now you see that they're changing. They look like one is going in one direction and the other one is going in the other direction, because they haven't figured out that they need to reconcile. In fact, if you pull the two fists back into the original position, you'll see that they're still going in the same direction. It's just an optical illusion, and it's a very good metaphor, visual metaphor for understanding the split, because we need to look at it. In fact, this is your job right here, as the ego is to reconcile these two halves. Not to choose an angel, not to choose a demon, not to choose a positive, not to choose a negative. You're supposed to fold back together and become one again, because they are one. So the masculine and the feminine are not separate from each other. They're one archetype and they operate together. You can't have one without the other. Maybe you came to life as a man or a woman, and that's very important. So as a man, you'll be more aligned with the masculine, and as a woman, you'll be more aligned with the feminine energy. It's no mistake now that Actually, this is highly weaponized against society, with the things that are happening in some schools in the world, where children are encouraged to make the very important decision about their bodies at a very young age without their parents' consent. They're actually confusing these kids. And I'll say no more about that. I'll only add that by doing that, what they're doing is to take away from them this immensely powerful energy that is available in the masculine and feminine. What they're actually doing is taking all the power of the masculine and feminine. And the fact is that if you want to grow one, you have to grow the other. So both men and women have the masculine and the feminine energy within themselves. And if women want to grow their feminine energy, they have to grow their masculine one as well at the same time, and vice versa. But it's about realizing that we reject part of ourselves if we reject either the feminine and the masculine. Personally, I recognize that for most of my life, I was at war with my feminine archetype, and it would play out in my health, especially regarding my cycle. And now I realized it clearly. So we need to develop both at the same time, although then we embody either the feminine if we're women and the masculine if we're men. But we need to balance. We need to grow both and develop both because we need to balance. Balancing the masculine feminine energy is about the power of wholeness. When you stop seeing the opposition between the masculine and the feminine and you start harnessing the polarity, you begin to unlock that power. Remember, they look like they were in opposition, the two fists, but they don't oppose each other. They are polarized to each other, which is a different thing. What that polarization creates is electricity. And then we have electromagnetic force. When you feel the tension between a man and a woman, whether that's positive tension or negative tension, whether that's attraction or aversion, realize that you have found electromagnetic force. Of course, you want the charge and the tension between men and women to be positive. But in any case, you want men and women to be polarized, not in opposition. And the only way to be polarized is to really understand what that opposition is. You don't want them to be in conflict, which is what we believe right now. It's of no surprise that they tried to get men to look like women and make women more like men, and then we lose that charge entirely. So without that opposition, we lose that charge, and we lose it mainly because we see this opposition as a conflict, but it's not. It's a polarity. So is one of the natural laws of both gender and polarity that everything in nature carries the masculine and the feminine archetype. And I invite you to observe it. Start observing these things. Polarity creates the charge. The greater the polarity, the greater the charge. So if a strongly masculine man attracts a strongly feminine woman, that's what you want, because that makes for an extremely powerful union. It's a marriage of energy. A strong charge creates this powerful force. And we're not just talking about the actual marriage of man and woman, although we're using this metaphor to show how these opposites marry together. You know, it's in everything within yourself. And what does marriage bring about? Creation, of course. Maybe it's another human. Maybe it's about a project. Maybe it's a way of being or a way of living. That's why the marriage between a man and a woman is a natural thing if we want to create, to build anything in balance. So the esoteric principle of opposites basically assumes that we are in opposition, but it's not the reality. And we need to come round to that. We need to understand that they actually don't oppose each other. On the contrary, they create that charge by dissolving the opposite, coming into the natural fullness that is the archetype of masculine and feminine. And though we embody both masculine and feminine energies, as I mentioned earlier, gender specifies the expression of that polar charge. So right now, it's important for us to first distinguish what each polarity represents. So there are masculine and feminine actions, and the action of the feminine is to create a vacuum, and the masculine fills that vacuum. The masculine is the ice, the salt, descending energy, crystal energy. It's a solid energy, and it's compared to the all-knowing eye. It means stability, amperage, and push. These are the qualities in here. The feminine, on the other hand, is the fire that melts the ice of the masculine. It's the oil element compared with the crystalline or solid element of the masculine. It's an ascending or rising energy. It's oil. The oil will rise to the top of the solution. So ice gets ignited by the feminine fire, and women light the fire under the man's butt. They create a vacuum, a void, a need for some kind. Yeah, to continue the metaphor of the marriage is like the women requesting their man to build something for the household that they need, and the masculine fills that void, responds to the call. She creates the void, and the masculine fills that void. That's nature's way. So when oil and salt marry, they become one. Not just that together 1 + 1 = 2, they become something greater, a new thing, a brand new energy that can't be recreated. It's a state of wholeness that you achieve by marrying and balancing these two. The wholeness of your being, it's the wholeness of your experience. The marriages of opposite brings about an incredible amount of energy. Do you know why? Because when you're no longer using your life energy, your own life energy, to hold them unnaturally apart, which is another word for suppression, you get to feel full of energy because you're not using that energy to repress. So once the carbon and the cellular material of the earth element is purified on both sides, and the fire, they will rise together and they will fall together. That's the marriage. When they're no longer two, but they're a third new entity. So the purpose is to take that ego and join the two egos of the masculine and feminine and join them together to become a superconductor. And so that's why I recommended to watch Benjamin's video, because you'll understand the dynamics, what you need to do to create that unity and to become a superconductor, which means instant power. And this is what we're working towards. This is the primal power that we don't necessarily have to its full extent until we do this work. So there are traditional gender roles that flow with nature, and of course there are many that flows against it. You're spending energy when you go against nature, and you're gaining energy when you go with it. And so you slipstream it. So you don't waste a lot of energy. The masculine in general is more about problem solving, methodical sequencing, providing resources, linear sequencing, building, and doing the muscle work. Also giving directions. And the feminine in general is about creating change, the opposite of stability. But with the masculine in tow, who will take care of the details of that change, he'll prevent chaos. Women are about holistic planning rather than linear problem solving. The feminine tends to see like a floodlight, whereas the masculine vision is more like a spotlight. And they're both very useful. A woman will generally keep an eye on the whole family all at the same time, the kids, the grandma, the partner, the in-laws. She's got an eye on the whole thing, how they're all operating together. The man will spotlight in and will intervene when some aspect of the project will create problems. For example, in a family context, typically the masculine is a better disciplinarian. The feminine is more about caring, managing resources, giving nourishment. That's more of a natural department for women. It doesn't mean that you can't flip-flop between roles either, yeah? I'm not saying that we have to go back to our grandparents' generations where women stay in the kitchen and, you know, all the traditional roles and staying fixed on that track. No, it doesn't mean that, but we need to rediscover the power of those roles, because you can flip-flop between roles, but if you are in a marriage, you can be mindful of that. Does it create chaos when you overstep and you try to be in the masculine role? Simply notice these things. And we see that this archetype has been weaponized against us. Things such as institutionalized abuse, including sexual abuse. In case you haven't noticed, there is a war on the masculine-feminine archetype. There's nothing to make you suppress that more than sexual abuse, or other things like rites of passage that remove a boy from the maternal care, love and nurturing. Of course, kids need to learn to stand, to gain their independence, but it's got to be done in a way that is gradual and is over the course of being loved and cared for. Another thing that suppresses the masculine and messes around with the masculine is circumcision. That's a major attack on the masculine. Even if it's done as a baby and you may have forgotten that experience, there is an energetic damage that is done that men carry around as trauma. I know of a few. Women, for example, have the mother wound, which is when we go to war against each other because it's too painful to go to war against our mother. So you're at war at the level of your peers. You're at war at the level of those who should be your allies. There's a lot to talk about how society has messed us up through culture over the decades. There's really a lot, with half-truths that hide false ideologies in our gender politics. The family structure has been almost destroyed, and as a result, the future generation will suffer greatly if they'll get a chance to do that at all. I don't mean to be negative, but that needs to be taken in consideration. That's why we now must take things apart until we reach a holistic understanding of our true nature. It's kind of like our duty to do it now, because we really need to look inside ourselves, and it's our duty if that's what we want to do. If we want to live, and we want to live in alignment and on purpose. Currently, men are made to feel artificially powerless. You see all kinds of things going on in the world. High rates of suicide among men for many decades now. Women, on the other hand, are made to feel artificially powerful also by culture. They're full of bravado, but actually, if a woman really had to be the head of the spear, the being that sacrifices herself for the greater good of the whole community, the whole tribe, she won't be the one who sacrifices herself. She's nursing a baby. She can't do that. She's actually in the community. She's responsible for basic care. So she's not going to she's not going to risk her life to do that. It's not her power to do that. She will not be effective at war. So what we need to do is to follow this process of alchemy. And to begin with, we need to break out both masculine and feminine in more details. This is the process of alchemy. is to take apart things before you put them back together again. Now, the breaking apart is never really true, because we're still one. But it gives you the chance to look within with a very precise eye. Precision is of enormous value here. If you know exactly where you're stuck, and you can do that with archetypes, then you're one step away from being unstuck. That's why the archetypes are such magic. You know, you can find one little thing, and this is an exercise in taking inventory. So in a moment, I'm going to go through the sacred contract and the qualities and the shadow aspect of each part of this archetype, so of the masculine and the feminine. So watch what you see inside yourself. Which of the masculine and feminine shadow is in particular you are finding that you're resonating with? That means you're losing energy to them. They lie in your unconscious. They will be acting out, trying to get your attention by getting you results that you don't want, by giving you grief and suffering. Or they might be giving you that motivation to heal and have a breakthrough. It depends on you, how ready you are to actually look at them square in the face, accepting them as they are, and then transforming them, and then you just reconstruct everything and you will be achieving that wholeness. And then you will really see who you are. So the masculine archetype sacred contract is pointing towards the epitome of the masculine. I give life stability. That's the main role. So the strengths and gifts of the masculine come out when they're doing purposeful work. This is vital for a man, otherwise he will feel useless, which is a lie, but in the absence of purpose for work, it will feel like it's the reality that they feel useless. So let's go through the masculine and the feminine aspects. The sacred contract of the masculine is to give life stability. The strengths and gifts are doing purposeful work, protection of the vulnerable, transmission of energy and messages, leadership, filling a void with power, responding to change, building a life, giving, taking a firm stance, spotlight focus, cathode, producing a charge, turning on the lights, navigation, spatial wisdom, taking risks in the world, heroically answering the feminine call. Now the shadows, you will find that the shadows are kind of similar, but they're becoming shadows because there's no purpose there. And so these are the shadows, ignoring the work they're called for, uniting with the feminine before they are stable, protecting only self-interest, withholding energy and messages, filling a void by controlling others, which is a fake power, giving to get, being destabilized by change, neglecting to build required foundation, giving where there's no reception at all cost, discharging instead of reabsorbing that power, resisting inner exploration, linearity, taking purposeless risks, feeling useless, numb and zoning out, fear of the feminine call. So now we're going to move on to the feminine. And the sacred contract of the feminine is I create and dissolve life. The strengths and gifts are seeing the need, seeing the solution, drawing power, anode, receiving the charge, initiating change, running a home, receiving, let me repeat that again, receiving, let that sink in, moving like water around if needs be, receiving a charge, getting turned on, leaps of intuition, floodlight focus, emotional wisdom, taking risks in the inner world, and heroically answering the masculine call. The shadow, again, same principle. When there's no purpose and there's an imbalance, the same qualities become the shadow aspect. So creating artificial or purposelessness need, neglecting to seed solutions, manipulation, being unsatisfiable, creating chaos, neglecting a home, taking, attaching out of fear of not surviving, receiving a charge and getting turned off, distrust of intuition, laser focus on what's wrong, loss of the big picture, emotional recklessness, neglecting the masculine call out of self-protection. So see what resonates with you, masculine or feminine, because you need to find where the imbalance is. And personally, I worked a lot through this because before you work with people and before you actually guiding other people, I worked on it myself. And when I look at the mantra, I ignite change, I think about my name, which is Fiamma. And Fiamma is the flame, the inner flame of the solar plexus. So these are the aspects of the masculine and the feminine that we need to look at. We need to dismantle, we need to engage with whatever resonate with us. And then we continue, this is how we would use, the way we would use the archetype in deprogramming, then we just move on to release through deprogramming. So if you found this useful, please like the video and share it. And even better, subscribe to the channel to help it grow into a community of awakened individuals. We're all living with the same goal in mind, freedom and personal sovereignty. Now is the time to step outside our boxes and just connect with like-minded people to share our insights and curiosity. So if you want to know more after you have followed this work on archetype, this introduction on archetype and what you can achieve with that, if you want to know more or you have a comment about this episode, why not reach out and connect with me? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to answer any questions that you may have. And I want to thank you for listening all the way to the end. And for now, my name is Roxana Fiamma. I'm your hero's journey and transformation coach. And this was the Conscious Cruising Podcast.